Thank you. Thank you, Arnie. I've been asked to speak right into the mic today for the purposes of historic documentation. It's great to have Ray Anderson with us. I've been doing these sessions, this will be my third year, and we've had a chance to talk to a lot of fascinating musicians who come at the music from a variety of perspectives. Ray, one of the most original voices on any instrument, I think, in the last 30 years since his emergence. And I wanted to start with a few questions and open it up to you, as we always do. And I guess to start at the beginning, to hear you play the trombone, it seems like it must have been in the crib with you when you were an infant. It just seems so right for you and what you express musically. But I wonder how you did find your way to the instrument, how that all started.
Well, school band or orchestral instrument program, just right out of school, what instrument you want to play. And my father had Dixieland jazz records. Okay. And the sound of the trombone is what attracted me, the sound. So I owe that to Vic Dickinson and Trummy Young and the Dukes of Dixieland and various other people. He was not a heavy jazz aficionado or real, but he liked Dixieland. He had some records around. He had some Louis Armstrong. He had some stuff. And so I started in the 4th grade, and I just never stopped.
Now, I had read somewhere that, excuse me, that both you and another great trombonist, George Lewis, began taking lessons at the same time. Is this correct? Mm-hmm. So did you just have the world's greatest trombone teacher, or was this just pure serendipity?
I guess it's just one of those things. We were the 2 kids in the 4th grade of the University of Chicago Lab School who elected trombone as the instrument to take in this, at 4th grade, when the school tried to make this thing possible for kids to study an instrument. It's like you could rent the trombone, and the school gave us lessons once a week by the guy who was in charge of music ed at the school at that time. And this is interesting because his name is Frank Tiro, and he's since become the dean of the School of Music at Yale University. He's quite a guy. He's written a couple different books, jazz histories and stuff. He's quite an amazing guy. But he's an alto player. He's not a trombone or even brass player. But he had the music teaching skills to start somebody off on the thing. And then I was very fortunate some 4 years later or so when the guy they hired to run the jazz band in the high school was, by coincidence, a trombonist. So that was a very good relationship for me because I took private lessons with this guy as well as just hanging out in all the bands,
Well, I imagine that Chicago was as fertile an area for musicians to really come of age and put their feelers out and take in a lot of inspiration. Can you talk about some of the music you heard growing up that really shaped you in those years?
Oh, yeah. Chicago was great for that. And to be in Hyde Park on the South Side meant you were exposed, of course, to blues and, Motown is what we danced to. And, that Chicago blues tradition is wonderful, it's deep. And I sort of worked my way through jazz history with my brother. Like I say, we started out with this Dixieland thing, and then we started, buying different secondhand records from the big Maxwell Street secondhand flea market place. We go down there on Sunday morning to Maxwell Street, see if you could find Cadillac Joe. You could buy records for 50 cents or $1 out the back of his Cadillac. And we got all kinds of stuff. We got this kind of haphazard but wonderful education because it's just like, well, whatever he had, we'd try and buy, you know. So we got Lou Donaldson record, and then we got some, you know, I remember when we got these Coleman Hawkins records, and that blew my mind, you know. It's like Coleman Hawkins, man, the sound that Coleman Hawkins had. So I worked my way through a lot of jazz history in this kind of catch-as-catch-can way, you know. And we got some, when we first got some Dizzy Gillespie records, you know, then I wanted to sound like Dizzy, you know. I still do. I still want to sound like Dizzy and Coleman Hawkins on the trombone. That's really what that's really all I'm doing.
Do you think, not that you can put them on a scale and weigh them, but in terms of inspiration, do you think instrumentalists other than trombonists had a greater impact on shaping your style?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah, I would say yes, definitely. And then I want to mention that at the end of the time when I was in Chicago, because I did leave in 1969 when I was 16. I left Chicago. I wanted to get away. But in my last couple years there, we were also going to early AACM concerts, and that completely blew my mind. I remember just being dumbfounded by the sound. I went to particularly one duo concert with Roscoe Mitchell and Joseph Jarman. They're just the two of them, and they had, 75 instruments up there, including a theremin and, everything. And I was just like, and this is funny to talk about this because I was commissioned last year to write a piece for this pocket brass band that's playing tonight by the Chamber Music America. And so the piece is Sweet Chicago Suite. And it's a series of, reminiscences and
we can edit it out.
memories. Let's call it, reflections and, of a lot of these different experiences. One of the pieces is called the Magnificent Mystify, which in fact is a kind of recounting of that shock of hearing this AACM and not having the foggiest notion how this music was constructed or put together or what they were doing. It's like, what are they doing? So it's wonderful. That's a wonderful experience, to have something that's just so foreign and amazing and obviously deep and intense, but you can't figure it out, It's like, wow. It's great.
With all the musical influences on you, I've often wondered if there was some theater in your background, because you always seem to me to have much more sense of yourself as a performer in terms of even what you wear, how you conduct yourself on stage, compared to many other jazz musicians. And I wondered if you participated in theater or anything like that while you were doing music, or where that side comes from.
I honestly don't know. No, I have no theater experience other than I was in one play in high school. I was once in a play. It was fun, but it wasn't my passion.
But you know what I mean? In a period when many musicians were trying so hard to be cool and diffident and unfazed, you seem to expression is like a full body experience.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Well, that's just being who you are. The music is really about being who you are. So I'm so mindful always of the real honor of being able to play. I like playing. So and as I get older, that just increases. I have so much gratitude for the opportunity that I want people to know that. And I also think that art is not served by false seriousness. So it's serious fun that we're having. And you don't need to be cloaked in some high priest-like aloofness to be playing something meaningful.
Now, trombone players often find themselves pigeonholed in terms of the kind of musical situations they can get into. You mentioned Dixieland is a great refuge for a lot of trombone players. Latin music seems to have more space for the trombone. Big bands, obviously. What were the mix of experiences when you came to New York and you're now committing yourself to be a musician, the environments you were working in and the ones you had to create for yourself that allowed you to perhaps express things you couldn't do in other contexts?
Yeah. Exactly those. Big band, Latin music, Dixieland, rhythm and blues. Played a lot of rhythm and blues, top 40 kind of stuff. I always tell students to take every gig, because you learn something from every gig. So I learned a bunch of stuff from all those gigs, and a lot of them I still am happy to do. You know, my friend Rick Davies was in town here last night with a Latin jazz thing, and it was really fun to go sit in with him and play some of that stuff. We used to play 3-4 times a week in New York. I made my living doing that for some years, and that's a wonderful education. But it is clear that at a certain point you have to create your reality, you know. And particularly on trombone, if you sit around and wait for the phone to ring with some kind of incredibly creative gig, you might wait a long time. You know, I mean, I was lucky. I was working with Braxton and Barry Altschul and various people. You know, so I did have some really beautiful creative gigs, and I also had these cooperative associations. You know, that were so it wasn't my band, but it wasn't not my band. You know,
Right.
so it was entirely cooperative, democratic kind of thing.
Well, I wanted to ask you about one of them, which I assume is still ongoing, and it's called bass trombone.
Yeah.
Which has been around at least 25 years.
25 years now.
Could you
Yeah.
tell everybody about
Well,
that?
bass trombone is Mark Helias, that's the bass, and Jerry Hemingway is the drum, and I'm the bone, of course. And we met in '76, I think, in New Haven, Connecticut. Hemingway is born and raised from up there, and Helias went to Yale, so he was there. And I can't quite remember how I got up there. I think Mark Dresser was there, and I went up to visit him. And then there was a whole pool of people there, including Ferron Acloff was there. Anthony Davis was up there. George Lewis was up there because he went to Yale. So there was quite a scene. And I was living in New York, but would go up there once in a while and hang out. And somewhere in there, the three of us met and had a session and played, and it was just one of those instant communication things. It's just one of those things that worked so well that we kept doing it, and we're still doing it. It's 25 years now. We had a little tour of Europe in March, and there's a record. There's a record that's it's only about a year old or so since we made that last record. So we keep going, and that's entirely cooperative. So everybody writes, and the beautiful thing is that you know, every once in a while we get this together, and all three of us keep growing. So it's always really stimulating. Hook up with those cats because they're not standing still, you know, and so that I always have much to learn from them.
Now, what's the trick to keeping a unit like that together? Because you're all doing different stuff. You all have a variety of projects of your own, projects with other people. I mean, have there been some rules that have evolved over time?
Not really. Long-term planning, that's your only hope.
Okay.
You got to set it up way in advance. You know, you need to set it up a year in advance or something. Otherwise, it just won't happen because everybody will be busy, and you know, we just can't get it together. But if we can block off a period of time far enough ahead, you know, then we'll just hold it. And that's, you know, there have been times when a lot of time went by and we just couldn't get it together, like several years go by without really having a tour or anything. But now in the last 7-8 years, we've been hooking it up, you know, about once a year and a half, something like that.
Now, was Slickophonics another one of the
Yeah.
collectives?
Yeah.
Because that was one of the first bands in my recollection where somebody who had been identified with the quote-unquote avant-garde took a step into a realm that would almost be, I guess, dance music is as good a term as anything.
Definitely.
And what was the thinking behind that?
Well, they pigeonhole you, but that has nothing to do with who you are, So my first international exposure jazz gig was with Anthony Braxton. So therefore, I got labeled as an avant-garde trombonist. And believe me, I love the music and fit right in. I mean, I don't have any problem with it. But my palette is not that narrow and never has been. So, when I grew up, we were into all that, Dizzy and then Coleman Hawkins and all that stuff. And then Jimi Hendrix came along, and I was the world's biggest Jimi Hendrix fan, And then Sly and the Family Stone came along, and, all that stuff was my music. James Brown, that was my music, So that's as much a root to me as anything else, dance music and that kind of funk thing. That's, that goes back as far as anything in my life. So it's not in any way an abrupt turn. It's just realizing what's in you in different ways.
Right. It seems that as your career has progressed, that strain has kind of woven itself in and out of several of the bands that you have. The Alligatory band, I think, is one.
That was really about that, sure.
Well, that was a smaller unit, I guess?
No, it was actually bigger in that there were only 5 people in Slickophonics, and the Alligatory band was 6.
Okay.
So, but yeah, the kind of mandate or mission to explore all different kinds of dance rhythms and do it in a way that's creatively interesting so that we can stretch and play these tunes differently every night and have it go to places where we don't know where it's going to go. To have this basis of dance rhythm and also lyrics, and singing, but at the same time be improvisatory is really fertile ground. It's fun to do that. That's fun to do. I love doing that.
Now, you've done projects of that type. You've played standard material songs that people are familiar with. You've done more abstract music. The pocket brass band seems to bring a lot of that stuff together.
Yeah, this is a good synthesis for me because it being modeled in a way on that New Orleans dance thing and stuff, that's that funk dance root is right in there, and yet at the same time it's the ancient sonorities, it's just brass and drums. So there's a sonic thing that's fun to explore, and then we stretch this on out as wherever it wants to go, so it's got a wide range of stuff.
Now, I can recall one of your, I guess it would be a Gramavision album back in the 80s where it was sort of a brass focus, but it wasn't the pocket brass band yet.
Right.
Right. I wonder if you could talk a little about the evolution of the whole concept of the band and how you got, because it seems like such a perfect blend of instruments right now, but I don't know that it just hit you or you had to work your way to it.
Oh, it kind of evolved. I met Bob Stewart a long time ago, and he's been a big influence and just a wonderful associate, and so at a certain point I got that idea of well why don't I play with Stewart and without a bass, I made that one record for Enja where Stewart is on there and there is a bass. It's Mark Dresser and Bob Stewart. But then sometime around in there I started that, well, what would that be like to just do tuba, trombone, and drums? Try that trio out. So I did that. I did a bunch of that. And then it was something I thought about doing, and then, somehow this thing kind of evolved. But it wasn't until I figured out that I needed a trumpet to really complete the thing. Because with just the trombone and the tuba and the drums, it's not really a brass band yet. It's just some kind of sort of, avant-garde ensemble or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But once you add the trumpet, well, then you have one of each, and it actually is a little tiny brass band. So when did I think of that? I don't know, somewhere around 97 or 8 or
See, I remember
somewhere
hearing
around
the
in there.
band in Montreal around that time, which had to be around the time it was formed, I would guess.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I think so. Right. Right.
And clearly you didn't have a notion to just play one style of music because I know you've got Scott Joplin music, you've got Monk, you've got Ellington.
Yeah.
I mean, you really represented the historic spectrum as
Yeah.
well as your own original stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
So, I mean, do you have preferences? Is this a band you would embrace now, or do you still do other things as well?
Well, I've been doing more of this than anything else at this time. But I won't do this exclusively. You know, something else will come along, and does. You know, I still do quite a bit of work just in a more traditional jazz setting of bass, drums, and either piano or guitar and trombone. I sort of, like a sort of quote-unquote classic jazz instrumentation, you know. And that's dear to me. I like doing that. I still do a bunch of that. But this band has worked so well, and it's really fun to write for, and I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm really having a good time with this.
I assume that without the right people in the other chairs in the band, it's not going to work quite
You
as
got
well.
that right.
So
Yeah.
tell me about how you came to the people who are working with you now.
Well, the good news is that there is a little pool of people that I've used who can do this and do it well. And, of course, the music changes a lot depending on who comes. And that also is kind of hip in a way. So the band that's here at the festival is a sort of a number one band. This is the band that the piece was commissioned, that I wrote the piece for. And
these are guys you played with for
and
a
these
long
guys have
time,
done it
too.
a lot. Yeah.
But I mean, not just in
yeah.
this band, but in
Yeah.
other bands as well. Right?
In other bands as well, yeah, right. Because I know Jose from Threadgill and all kind of stuff, and Ferron and I go way, way back. I played with Ferron for years, so, and Lou and I go way back. So it's a good group. But I've also used Bobby Previtt on drums a lot. He's the drummer on the record.
Right.
And
think I
this
heard
guy, Matt Perrine, who lives in New Orleans, is the sousaphone player on the record. And I was just touring Europe just now with Lou and Matt and Bobby. We just did a couple of weeks in Europe because the way Jose and Ferron's schedules work, they can't really do that.
Yeah.
Go off for 2 weeks like that, you know. So it's because I don't have consistent work. I mean, I don't work all the time. So it's necessary to have a bunch of people who can do this, you know, so that when I get work, then I figure out who's available, you know. And Eddie Allen has played the trumpet chair. Jack Walrath has played the trumpet chair. Bob Stewart has played the tuba thing. Charlie Persip has
I was
played
gonna
the
say, I think I
drums.
heard Persip
Right,
with you,
Persip, you
Montreal.
know. So there have been a number of people that have done it, and it always makes the music different and always good. You know, I mean, I'd be learning something about the pieces just from seeing how different people approach it. So that's good, actually.
Now, you mentioned being commissioned to write a suite, and I often wonder, is that really a different challenge than just writing 5 or 6 pieces of music? I mean, do you write a suite with the notion of continuity in mind, or do you just find 6 or however many inspirations that strike you and say, there it is?
You kind of just write what you write, and then you try and figure out how they fit together, you know. And in point of fact, the commission just said an extended work. So it was my idea to turn it into a suite. They didn't say write a suite, you know. So it could have been one piece that was 45 minutes long or something. That would have been fine for them. You
So
know.
what were some of the other vignettes that are represented in addition to the Jarman and Mitchell
Well, I
concert?
got this thing that the first piece in the suite I wound up calling Chicago Grays, which of course is a little bit of a play on words because of the Chicago blues, but it refers to the ubiquitous gray wooden back staircases on all the apartment buildings in Chicago. Do you know Chicago?
Oh, yeah.
You know how they all have that same gray color wooden back staircases in all those apartment buildings. So I don't know where else that exists, but it certainly is a Chicago, property. So it's called Chicago Grays. But when I write music, the music shows up first, and then you get something and you work on it, and some of it you throw out, and some of it you keep, and you work on it, and and it evolves, and then at a certain point later on, I might figure out, oh, that's what to call this.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like I think of Chicago Grays and then I write this piece. A lot of time I just think of sound, and then I'm playing with sound, and I'm working with sound and rhythm and music, and I'm working on something, and then after a while I say, oh, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of that. And so then it gets a title.
Okay.
Do
you bring the music as a finished product to the pocket brass band, or does the band participate in the composition?
Oh, the band participates. Any good band participates. And that's who I'm seeking to hire, is folks who will bring some.
What kind of impact do they have on you as the person who's creating the music?
Well, generally I'm bringing in a fairly completed thing in terms of what the basic form, melody, and rhythmic feeling is. But then, when the band starts playing it, I might really hear something else, or it might really, something else may become obvious, And where the band's contribution is very important then is also in the next step, which is, well, okay, so now here we got this thing. Now what are we going to do with it? Like, where's the improvisation, or where does it go? Okay. What's the evolution of this piece? Like, okay, so here's your little
So it's
frame.
not just choruses that everybody's going to sing.
Yeah, it's like, well, so what are we going to do with this?
Yeah.
And that's where the band can be really helpful. Or you write something, you bring it in, and you hear it, and you say, well, that doesn't sound so good. Anybody got an idea? Like what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's important to have a band that can bring that.
Okay. I think we have a couple of members of the band here, at least we did at some point. They may have worked their way to the Contoys Club by now.
Bar.
But we do have people in the audience who might have some questions. So I want to make sure we open the floor up to anyone who might have a question for Ray.
Was the last time you were in town with the group Slide Ride?
I think so. Yeah.
That was a couple of years ago.
I think that was the last time. Right.
Is that organization still in existence?
Well, it definitely is, although we haven't done anything in a while. So it might be sort of a concept waiting to happen, like one of those seeds of the yucca plant or something, and it's hidden in the crevice, and if the right conditions occur, it'll bloom.
We have plenty of rain in May. Maybe it'll blossom.
If you may all know, but Slide Ride is a quartet made up entirely of trombones, correct?
Exactly.
And it was you and who else?
Craig Harris and George Lewis and Gary Valente.
Okay. And you've had other bands at this festival as well, right?
I was here with Hemingway one time.
Okay.
That was his quartet, actually.
You were also here with the Liberation Orchestra.
I was here with the Liberation Orchestra. I think that was a Flynn concert, not the Burlington Jazz Festival per se. But yeah, right.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
There was another question, David.
Ray, you love language. Every time I hear you speak, you love words. Do you write?
No, not really. Lyrics sometimes.
There's a poem on one of your records about what to listen to and how to approach.
I wrote that. Yeah, and I like to construct tune titles with little plays or twists or poetic suggestions to them, because the music exists on many different levels, so it always seems appropriate if the title also has a certain suggestive ambiguity.
Do we have any more questions from the audience? Back there.
How was your group in Montreal when you had Tommy Campbell on drums? Did you ever play with him?
Well, Tommy's living in Japan, and I haven't been able to play with him hardly at all since he moved to Japan. But that's just waiting to happen. You know, I almost got him down to New York just now in April, but we just couldn't quite squeeze it in. He's very, very busy, and we couldn't quite. We were one day off of. You know, Tommy could get there for the gig on Saturday, but he couldn't get there for the rehearsal on Friday. And it was a big, giant 13-piece band that had never existed, and I couldn't do it without rehearsal. So, you know, that didn't happen. But Tommy and I'll be playing some more. We're not done.
You have a question?
Do you have any big fantasies about future work or things you haven't done yet that you want to explore?
Yeah.
Or different aesthetic or harmonic or unharmonic direction?
Well, there's two things that are really important to me that I'm trying to get out in the world, and one of them is called the Feast of Luv, and it's an evening of music for trombone choir and gospel choir, and it's only been performed once, but it is again a suite-like thing, and it's all with lyrics from my wife who passed away last year, you know, and it's a spiritual oriented work that is absolutely without denomination or borders. So it's just something that celebrates the universal human yearning for the sacred, or for something that would lend meaning to this life, that, you know, that yearning that we all have. So it's a bunch of pieces about that, and it has, well, we did it with 9 trombones and about 30 voices, and some, you know, there's a couple vocal soloists who need to be able to improvise and sing these melodies, and then there's, you know, trombone soloists, and it was really quite an experience when we did it. It really had an amazing kick. So I want very much to do that some more, and don't have the opportunity at this moment, but that's something that I'm really interested in, if you know, if anybody knows how to do that. And the other one is this, I've been writing this music for a large kind of wind ensemble using flutes and clarinets and all the saxophones and trumpet, trombone, sousaphone, and drums. Like this, like a sort of expanded concept of this pocket brass thing with all these reeds in it as well, and that's about half done. You know, there's 3 of those finished, and there's 3 more that need to get finished. You know, that need to get done, and then that would also be like an evening's worth or an hour and a half worth or something of music, and I want very much to do that. It needs to be completed, and these are 2 things that came out of the Guggenheim Foundation. I got a Guggenheim grant in 2001, or it sort of overlapped 1 and 2, you know. So that's stuff I want to do, you know. Among other things, that's stuff I want to do. I got a lot of stuff I want to do, but those are some things I want to do.
You have recordings of some of that?
No, see, it's not been recorded. Well, yeah, I have a recording of the performance, yeah, but it's not good enough to release because the balances aren't good, you know. And we actually needed a bigger choir than we had. I did all this locally where I live in Long Island. And so, although I had a bunch of my slide ride compatriots come out, a lot of the other trombone players are just local cats from out there. So their rhythmic sophistication was not of the highest level, you know. And the choir was beautiful, but just not big enough. We just needed more voices because I figure you need at least 4 voices per trombone. So we needed about 40 people in the choir. We had maybe 25, 26, you know. So, you know, so I'm talking to some people in, I have some leads on this thing, but nothing's come about yet.
The back.
I can't remember, a year or two ago up in Montreal, you did a set with Enrico Rava,
Yeah.
which I thought was actually fabulous.
Hmm.
I'm wondering what your relationship with him, and I thought you guys meshed pretty well. I didn't know if it was a sort of a festival setup, one-shot kind of deal, or if you've got some sort of...
Oh, no, we have a history. I know Enrico for many years. And we used to play in the 80s a bunch. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know Enrico. He's a real partner. He's a partner and friend. So that was his idea. I think he had that same thing I had one year where it's a very hip thing in the Montreal Festival where they give 1 or 2 people this sort of carte blanche thing, and you have 4 or 5 days in that
the
little...
invitation.
The invitation. I think it was Enrico's invitation series. So, yeah. So he called us, you know. He was like, well, what shall I do, you know, this day, and what shall I do? Oh, okay, one day I'll call Ray and Mark Elias, you know, and was it Ferron? Who played drum? Might have been Ferron.
I think it might have, I think I heard the concert, and I think it might have been.
I think it might have been Ferron. It was really fun. I remember we had such a good time.
It's a nice space that they had playing up there.
Yeah. And that's an inspired thing to do at a jazz festival. That's a really good idea. You give somebody that kind of, you know, a beautiful space like that and 4 or 5 days and just say, okay, what do you want to do? You know.
I thought it was, for, as a musician, I was wondering, I was an Enrico Rava fan. I should say, well, I am. And
Mm.
I had not discovered you until that night. I'm not a huge jazz fan, I'm more a music fan.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering what those opportunities mean to you as a musician that probably doesn't get a whole lot of airplay, unless it's the right sort of radio format, and what that really means to be given that space if you're an Enrico Rava to sort of invite your friends in and maybe expand.
Oh, yeah, it's great. It's great because it gives you the opportunity to put together something that you haven't done yet, you know, which, of course, is always our greatest pleasure. I mean, that's a wonderful thing, you know. So when I had that, let's see, we did slide ride and we did bass trombone and we did a couple of different things. But the band that was created brand new for that thing was my blues band, that Lapis Lazuli band, with Amina, Claudine Myers, and Jerome Harris, and Tommy Campbell, I think, played that first one. You know, so that was, you know, there was this opportunity. It's like, well, what are you going to do on the 4th day? It's like, whoa, okay, so, all right, well, let's get a Hammond organ and play some blues. It's like, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea, you know. And it was a good idea, you know. It's like, but see, so it's that opportunity sets that up, you know. It's like, well, okay, damn, what else are we going to do? Well, let's get a string quartet and see what'll happen with string quartet and trombone, you know. I mean, it's a great thing.
Well, I'm not sure if there are any more questions. We were asked to end a bit early today because there's going to be a sound check going on here, and also because Ray's going to be performing at 6:30 over at the Contois Club. which is another unique setting. I don't know if you've played in there before.
I have actually,
but,
yeah. I like it in there. It's good.
Good place from an
Yeah.
audience's perspective to hear music, and Ray's music ought to be perfect for the space. So you can see Ray again at 6:30, a couple of blocks away. There's music here at 8:30, Jean-Michel Pilk's trio, and tomorrow afternoon, beginning at 5, a series of films and talks and interviews and music from Matthew Shipp will take place in this space. So I'll see everyone again at about 6:45 as part of the Matthew Marathon, and Ray will see you at 6:30, and thanks very much for being with us this
All
afternoon.
right. Hey, man. Beautiful.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Nice talking to you.